Yeah, I mean, I felt like the ending had left things to be desired. I mean, and maybe it's just because they're trying to leave it
Mhm.
ambiguous. I mean, as you said, if it was trust, I guess that makes some level of sense why they ended it like that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's like you have Kira and Alexei, like they're in the shuttle together, like one Russian, one U.S. astronaut, and like they're going back to Earth, but they're kind of disobeying orders. They're like leaving the ISS unmanned. They're uh, it's not clear what's going to happen. Like it's clear from the responses going to the ISS that they're expecting victory. Both sides are. They're
Right.
expecting like they're still wanting the objective, and it hasn't been done. So
Yeah.
there's no. It's like it's unclear what's going to happen to them at the very end. Like when they're going back to Earth. Like what's going to happen. I kind of would like a little bit more closure on that front, I guess, for me personally, but I don't know.
I need to know who gets it.
So,
That's
well, I
funny.
feel like maybe it's just because it's like maybe because I saw the conflict a little bit more as like being united or like trying to reconcile their differences or something. I don't know,
Uh-huh.
like because I felt like even from the get go from this movie, like when the conflict started coming out, there was only four endings this movie could potentially have. Two of them being U.S. wins, Russia wins. Like those are the two
Right.
possible
Right.
endings. Third ending being the space station just blows up and everyone dies.
Right.
And then the
Of course.
fourth one being like, oh, they somehow reconcile their differences and figure out a solution together, which is predictably what happened.
Right.
Um, but in a way, it's still like if that was the whole point of the movie, like that was only between the astronauts. It wasn't between the governments. It wasn't between like it kind of leaves some of the conflicts in that regard that are hiding on in the background. They just leave them open ended.
I mean, obviously they weren't central to the story, so it's not like that they were necessary
Yeah.
to be completed, but it does leave something wanting, and I think that's, I guess, the question between like a some good stories. Some people would argue that the fact that you want to see what happens next is the sign that this is a great story and that you should want to have questions lingering at the back of your
Well, I
mind.
don't know. Like,
Because like there's a certain degree in which there is no way any storyteller is going to answer every question you have in your mind. And so
well,
if they
true. Yeah.
are, they're probably spending way too much time explaining things that really shouldn't be explained. And
Hmm.
so there's a certain sense in which you, as the audience, fill in some of those gaps that they leave
Hmm.
for you intentionally. Now, there are some movies like this, or in more drastic examples, they do it more intentionally, such as in The Thing, which we just recently reviewed on this podcast, where it's a horror movie, and at the very end, the question is who is bad and who is good, and you don't know.
Hmm.
And that, in some ways, just pisses people off because you just don't know and you won't ever know. And
Hmm.
so sometimes the leaving of questions is intentional in stories.
Hmm.
And to a certain degree, obviously you're not if you're trying to be unsettling, you're going to leave bigger questions like they do in The Thing. But in a more general sense, you can't answer every question. And so some questions will remain unanswered. And so what questions can you justifiably leave unanswered? Um, I thought that this was one of those cases.
Well,
It
I
sounds
guess
like you did not, which is
I mean, I guess maybe it just would have helped to understand the motivations for like because we're left in the dark what's happening on Earth, more or less.
sure.
It would have been, and I guess maybe there's a part of it was like, why does NASA and the Russians why do they each want the International Space Station? Like that's maybe not clearly spelled out in the conflict of the movie, like especially with this big battle going on Earth. Like what is like this isn't like a military site. This isn't like a bomb dropping like space station or something. So it's almost like what is the point of this station? Like they're doing tests up here. And it's like,
Uh-huh.
okay, I guess I would have liked to have seen like more reasons from the governments, like why we need this, like why like they want their teams to take the ISS. So that's never
Okay.
answered, and
So,
I guess I would have liked to have known more of that, but that was never explained. And also just to be clear, like you can have leave a conflict hanging, like as you said, but not necessarily want to see the next one. Like if a sequel were to say come out for this movie, I would not watch it. I'm just saying that right now. Just like I have no desire
Mhm.
to see a second movie or even necessarily to rewatch this one. It's just like I'm kind of like bummed more like, well, why didn't they answer this question? It's almost like disappointment, I guess, for me.
My understanding of the taking over of the space station was specifically for the cure. So
Okay.
they wanted them to take over the station so they could get this cure for radiation from nuclear fallout
Mm-hmm.
that they could then take back to their country. And the idea was that they could get it first to make sure that the other country didn't get it. And clearly, since they're at war, they don't really trust the other country to give them the cure to the problem they caused. So it wasn't like it would, if that is the reason, that they would be unjustified. But that was
Mm.
my understanding of the scenario.